Simela, sihamba ngamalashe, sivele dala kubai.
Hello, Sanu, Jambo, Salam. I'm Thembekile Mrototo. Welcome to this edition of Unwrap Africa, where we focus on the latest news, trends, and successes from the African continent. Siakag. We'll have a lot more of that incredible dancing in a moment, but first we're asking you this question tonight: can Starlink satellite internet service bridge the digital divide in rural Lesotho, as well as unlock new opportunities for education, business and connectivity across the African continent? You can let us know your thoughts by sending a WhatsApp to 078-459-1897. That's +27 if you are dialing in from outside South Africa. So you can also find us on Facebook at SABC Unwrap Africa, and on X, SABC News_TV is our handle. Let's start now with a look at the top stories from the continent this week. At least 16 people have been killed, while many have been taken to hospital with gunshot wounds after being tear-gassed during demonstrations demanding President William Ruto stick to a one-term limit in the country. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System has launched a blockchain-based marketplace for trading in African currencies. The move is aimed at making it easier for companies to repatriate their profits and to reduce the continent's dependence on the US dollar. Zambia's former president Edgar Lungu was remembered at a memorial service in Johannesburg, but a court ruling prevented his burial in Gauteng due to a feud between his family and the Zambian government. And Google has picked 15 AI startups in Africa for its accelerator program. They will get expert support as well as tools to help grow their businesses. Also tonight, South Sudanese teenager Kaman Malauch has made history by becoming the highest drafted player to come through the NBA's African Academy. The 18-year-old center was drafted by the Houston Rockets and traded to the Phoenix Suns. I want to expand further, in fact, on one of those stories about Kenya, where there's again been violence during demonstrations when police tried to clamp down on protests. The Kenyans were commemorating last year's protests when they took to the streets to oppose the implementation of new tax laws, which were subsequently rejected by the people. Have a look.
Today we are here to demand accountability, to demand transparency, to make sure that each and every public servant has a duty to protect and to follow the law and the Constitution of Kenya.
Well, Sudan is in crisis. That's the view of its former Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok. He claims that more than 100,000 Sudanese have been killed in a conflict that's been raging since 2021. Hamdok has met with both President Cyril Ramaphosa and the former South African President, Thabo Mbeki, in South Africa. Our international news editor, Sophie Mkwena, spoke to the former Prime Minister on the issues back home.
We have been engaging in putting forward our own vision in how to resolve this conflict, and if time allows, I will briefly maybe outline that to you. And our vision
to briefly outline the vision of your initiative.
To start with, we do not think there is a military solution to this conflict. We have to go through a credible political process. None of the fighting or belligerents will be able to achieve an outright victory. That's out of question. And if that is a foregone conclusion, why prolong the suffering of our people? We're putting forward a vision of three components. Number one, and most important entry point, is to be able to address the humanitarian crisis. People's life, people want to have food, shelter, medicine before anything else. So you have to keep them alive. So this is number one priority in the vision. The two others address the issue of stopping the war and ending the war. These are two different processes. Stopping the war is probably more technical process, which involve ceasefires, issues of modalities of monitoring and all that, corridors for supply lines and all this. But ending the war is a political process, which would require extensive, comprehensive dialogue. And in Sumud, we are proposing a roundtable conference that brings all the major actors, all those who were against the war and for peace and restoration of transition, democratic transition. So this is, broadly speaking, our vision to stop this war.
You're talking about people who want peace. You have belligerents. How do you bring the belligerents at the table? Because if you don't, you exclude them, they will continue with the fight. How do you ensure that both sides lay down their arms and they joined the peace negotiations or political program?
There are many approaches to this. The direct one is talking to them. This vision I'm talking about, almost a year ago, we wrote to both generals. General Hemeti accepted our call. He came, met with us in Addis Ababa. We signed with him Addis Declaration. We wrote to General Burhan, yet to meet with us, but we're not giving up on that. But this is one aspect of how we engage them. The most important aspect of putting pressure on the belligerents, first is by creating a broad front by the Sudanese people themselves. The widest possible political grouping, alliance of people against the war. The more we expand this, the more that voice becomes stronger in Sudan, in the diaspora, in the refugee camps and all that. This will put pressure on them. The third aspect, and this is where we thought South Africa could play a role in this, is our regional, international partners and international community to put pressure on both sides so that they can accept ceasefire and go through a political process that will bring peace back to our country.
And finally, your message to the African continent. Sudan is a member of this region, Africa. Your message to Africans, do you think they really understand and they see and hear the humanitarian crisis in Sudan and people dying daily.
Thank you so much for this. Sudan, a founding member of the OAU and the AU, I think our expectations from our brothers and sisters at all levels, leadership and the public in the continent, to help us address this crisis. But also I must so commend many countries in the continent and even beyond generously received our people as refugees in many places, in Egypt, in Chad, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, in the neighborhood, but also beyond, in the Gulf, in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, even here in South Africa and beyond, and probably even in Europe and others. I would like to thank that, and I would like to thank all the efforts that went into this. But we are looking for much more engagement that will help us end this crisis today before tomorrow.
So the Kingdom of Lesotho has joined the new era of high-speed connectivity using the first satellite-based broadband. Through a local company, T-Connect, Starlink satellite internet service officially went live in the country earlier this week. Lesotho is a beneficiary of one of 3 multi-million-dollar artificial intelligence data centers that will be constructed in the country, in South Africa and Botswana. Rapelang Khadebe has more.
Mark my words when I say this. When we are done, we would have created 10,000 direct jobs.
It is bold promises, large investments, and mind-boggling internet speeds. This is what Lesotho has been promised during the launch of the international tech company Starlink.
We have multiple services. I won't tell you where we're going to do it, but it's going to be up in the mountains. That someone goes and starts plotting some things around the site. But we would invite you to the Lesotho, which all things equal will be before the end of this year.
Lesotho is aiming to become a regional hub that exports digital skills. The government says it intends to level the playing field for all private sector entities so as to see a private sector-led growth.
So that means the Lesotho government will always receive all entities who are willing to do business in Lesotho. And we strongly believe, as the Right Honorable Prime Minister has said, that this initiative will also lead to engagement and employment of the youth, including expertise that is required. I was also talking with the Minister of Trade, and he informed me reliably that he has read one article where it was highlighted that in terms of innovators, Lesotho ranked number 4 in Africa as best innovators.
Led by an acclaimed son of the soil and broadcasting tech guru, Nolo Ledele, he allays fears that this product will jeopardize other network operators.
Starlink, I see it as it complements the telcos. It's not there to come and take away the people, people's jobs and so on. It's intended to access sites that even the telcos would never be able to provide except very expensively. For example, we have made some installations in fairly far-flung schools, like in Tawatseka. And you can imagine that if you have a school that's sitting Amakunyapani, so our big focus is to access those service areas.
Nolo says their recent launch in Botswana coincided with the floods that cut off most local communications, and their services came in handy where connectivity was near impossible.
But we were well positioned to be able to assist in providing internet services in areas where they didn't have internet. And that was a big plus in Botswana, that we were able to step in and actually help out with that. And Starlink themselves, in the States, they came in and they also provided assistance through us.
Through one of its Silicon Valley-based programs, some Basotho are already making strides across the globe.
He got an internship with a Canadian startup company, and 6 weeks later, they were actually asking him if he has never been employed and if it's the first time or he's doing the course, and he was like, yeah. So they're like, we're keeping you. So they kept him, and he'll be completing in Canada. So those Canadian dollars will be coming into this.
After the program, he was able to join the industry, working for some of the biggest agencies in South Africa. I actually gave him a call just to connect some dots of what's happened since we last spoke. And as we speak right now, he is an entrepreneur. He has his own company. He's currently based in the Philippines, and he is now servicing his clients internationally from there.
The Starlink business hopes to bridge the digital divide by ensuring reliability, speed, and affordability to all, even to the remotest and hardest to reach of places. I'm Rapelang Khatebe for SABC News, Masero, Lesotho.
Rapelang's report brings us to our question of the day. Do you think Starlink satellite internet service bridge or can help to bridge the digital divide in rural Lesotho, as well as unlock new opportunities for education, business and connectivity across the rest of Africa? Perhaps let us know your thoughts. Let's have a look at some of what's already come in terms of those opinions. We've got our first one there. Let's see what it says. It says here that, firstly, how much is Starlink? Can the people of Lesotho afford it? And what about the threat it poses to national security? So now the real question should be, do they really need it? That is from Pilani Donda. Truth Seeker says Starlink's business model does not create employment, it's not affordable, and is disruptive to existing network service providers. Bongani says, let me say, as long as everything is run by capitalists, nothing they offer will improve the lives of the poor. Mr. Musk, that's Elon Musk, who owns Starlink, is driven, he says, by power and control. And Africa needs solutions from Africa by Africa. Solutions, according to Bongani, that are intentionally driven to be developmental and not capitalist. P. Meshape says those new opportunities won't reach anyone, as the majority of Lesotho's population left to South Africa and doesn't show interest in returning back home to the ground. I'm not sure how factual that is statistically, but he does say that Starlink will soon be illegal in South Africa. Sage says, all I know is that the people in Lesotho are broke. This Starlink won't benefit the poor. Remind, as always, those views are not the views of the SABC or the Unwrap Africa team. We're back with much more after this. Welcome back to Unwrap Africa, where we are continuing to shine the spotlight on the continent and how people from our home countries are breaking ground on the global stage. And today we celebrate a trailblazer in motorsport, Tuta Mionki. From navigating the rough rally routes of Kenya to stepping into the high-pressure world of Formula One and the World Rally Championship, but not as a driver, but a steward observer, essentially one of the sports judges. She's joining us today from Nairobi. Tuta, good to have you on the SABC. Grateful for your time. As I was outlining there, you began your career, your motorsport journey at least, as a rally co-driver. This was more than 10 years ago. Let's go back to that moment when you started and how your love, in fact, for the sport began.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I basically joined motorsport in 2011. That's after having been a fan of the sport, just following the rally cars around the country. Would have at least 8 different locations, maybe in 7 different counties, and we thought it's a good thing to basically see the country as we enjoy the sport. And at one point, I felt like the people in the car were having more fun than I was, and found out, through a friend who was already in the sport, how to get into the sport. I was introduced to the Abdul Sidi Rally Academy. Abdul Sidi is a former co-driver who, his way of giving back to the sport is to teach new, fresh people, on co-driving. And that's how I got into the sport. I enjoyed it for about 10 years, in the co-driver seat, and felt Towards the end of 2019, that I was ready to slow down, and I spoke to one of my mentors, who the person would basically go to get information on rules, regulations, and I was a co-driver, just to understand that.
Right.
And he just finished his FIA steward training, international stewards training, and we talked about it a bit, and it felt something very familiar in the sense that my day job is in human resource, developing policies and ensuring discipline and applying the policies correctly and teaching other people on how to, apply policies. I felt that it was, because I didn't want to completely leave the sport, I felt that it was an area that I could venture into. And in 2021, I believe, of course, with COVID, there was nothing much happening in 2020 in terms of rallying. And I guess it sort of cemented my position in just slowing down.
Right.
And,
but Tuta, I want to come in there because, if I may, Tuta, you talk about slowing down, but when you look at your progress, it's anything but slow, right? Because you've been part of the FIA's high performance program, and you're one of a small group of people, just 23 global participants. What is that like, and what does it entail?
It's an amazing program, and I'm glad that the FIA, through the FIA president and all the stewards, thought of something like this, because it opened doors for us who probably in Africa and other parts of the world would never have been able to get into such a program. I got into the program through a regional training in Africa, and I was selected among the few that you've mentioned. The program basically identifies talent for stewards and race directors, assigns you a mentor, takes you through a 2-day program. We did that in Geneva, and then appoints you to attend events where you're basically part of watching experienced stewards do their job, which is amazing because you're actually part of the real thing, how decisions are made, how the discussions are held, and, that kind of thing. It's a really, really amazing program.
I'm curious about, now that you're privy, shall we say, to the decision-making behind the scenes, what has surprised you, but you were also the first woman, in fact, in Kenya to win the Motorsport Personality of the Year. So significant has been your impact, I suppose, and you've broken ground, haven't you, as a female co-driver, now as a steward. Let's talk about what representation means, both on the track and on the back end, where those decisions are indeed made.
I believe that a lot of us, before we get into that kind of situation, we watch the sport for the fun of it, but then there's regulations for each championship, and with those regulations, then that's what guides the stewards in making decisions. And we recently saw, like, Formula One on just Thursday last week publish stewards guidelines and driving standard guidelines to help the public, the fan, the consumer of the sport, understand how decisions are made. And speaking of being motorsport personality, I feel like my role is to basically encourage other women, get into the sport. It's still very male-dominated. There's room for us, for other women, for younger girls to get into the sport, whether it's in competition or as an official in regulations and that kind of thing. The opportunities are there. If you talk to the ASNs, which are the national sporting authorities affiliated to the federation, then you get to know what's available. Right now, there's a Women in Motorsport mentorship program that's going on. This is the second group. So the FIA website has a lot of information on how to get into the sport. And I'd like to encourage my fellow women, especially within the continent, this is the time to really get into the sport in whichever area you feel comfortable in.
Tuta, thank you so much for speaking to us. Tuta Mionki, I wish we had much more time to talk to you, but it's been a pleasure to connect with you on Unwrap Africa. Tuta Mionki is an FIA steward, observer, trailblazer in global motorsport. More from Unwrap Africa, or Unwrap Africa, when we return. Well, South Africa is closing off Youth Month, so we have a special performance for you by the Pretoria Boys High School Gumboot troupe, basically, if I can call them that. The school takes pride in the way in which it's been able to introduce a vast range of cultural activities that cater for the interests of all pupils. Nowhere else, they say, is the spirit of diversity so clearly manifested as in the Gumboot Dance Club, which we're now going to speak to, and we're joined by an old boy and coach, Museka Molepo, and the crew itself. They're going to dance us out in a moment, but for now, Museka, good to have you guys on Unwrap Africa. Gumboot dancing has a long history, right, in South Africa. Speak to us about its introduction at the school and how you each became involved and why this is the thing to do.
As most people know, Gumboot dancing started in the mines as a way of communication, and it then went out of the mines into the communities as a form of entertainment. At Pretoria Boys High, I'm not quite sure of how and it was made, but I have a feeling that it was something that was made to make us feel welcome, to connect us closer to our roots, and to make people more aware of where we come from and, use it to where we're going.
And do you guys only perform at school? And then, on top of that, when do you find time to prepare?
No, we not only perform at school, but we also get invited to perform at homes. We join competitions like the Talent Africa.
Right.
And we practice after school, which is usually our extramural times, from 2:30 to 3:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays, which is where we prepare for these performances.
Can I join? Am I too old?
Oh, you can join. You can join.
Am I too old or too heavy?
No, you can join. There's no requirements or anything. Anyone can join.
Okay, we're going to see if there's an overall in my size as they play us out, and maybe I'll make an appearance in the background. The Pretoria Boys High School Gumboot dancers playing us out this evening on Unwrap Africa. We're back with you at 8 p.m. next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Cha, cha, cha. Cha, cha, cha. Vala, when? Dia temba, guru guru, siaya, oza wena, umli, ovutayo.